Okay, okay. Thank you very much, Odiambulale. Good to have you and good to see all of you here. I'm happy to see you. And uh, time is really gone. We are going to just dive into what I think I want to share within the remaining time. I hope I am audible, right?
Yes, you
Yes or
are.
no?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So there is this word culture, organizational culture. Actually, part of my biggest interest is in organizational psychology. Yeah. And generally, what we call organizational behavior, how people perform, how people behave in an organization, how things work, and what causes performance and things like that. And And a big part of that is in the culture, and many of us have our own idea about culture. And perhaps a good point to start, I remember many years back, I attended one training by some leader from South Africa called Rory McDermid. And he talked about there are three things that determine success in any organization. Three major things. Yeah, there could be others, but there were three major things that he mentioned. As at then, I was building a network marketing business, a business that is still there. And I was just getting into the field of business. Uh, as it were, because literally I had been in business before, but those were small time businesses. And what he said were system, culture, and chemistry. System, culture, and chemistry. The question to me was what these things meant. But along the way, I learned that those are big topics of their own. And we've gone ahead to talk about systems and how to build business systems, sustainable systems over the years. We've gone ahead to talk about chemistry and lots of other things about that, and also culture. Culture, it's something that we can smell, we can see, we can visualize, we can interact with whenever we get into an organization. And each one of us, we have somewhat a way through which we interact with organizations' culture. And so, and so we can relate when we talk about organization culture. We can all notice it. I want to give just a few examples as we go along. When I joined one of immediately after college, after university, undergraduate, I joined an institution that was doing training, providing training services. Actually, that is where I started providing training to people, and they taught me a lot about public speaking. They taught me about training and things like that. And in this institution, there was a culture, a way of doing things, and one of them notable was in how we dressed. Everyone had to have a tie for some reason. Yes, the time to come to work, time to leave, and how we interacted with our customers, and even how we addressed each other, and the likes. You see, so this was my first official employment. The other things I'd been doing were small time, like working with the then Electoral Commission of Kenya, and maybe we were teaching in a school before I joined the university and something like that. So I learned that there were ways through which things had to be done, things had to be carried out in that organization. Yes, even how we would prepare for courses and deliver them, and how we picked feedback, and how recognition was done, rewards, all sorts of things. 2 years later, or less than 2 years later, I was into another organization. And the culture was very different. We could go to work in sandals, yeah, or as one day my HR manager called them. He told me, "Now you've started coming literally in sandals," but I was in some type of open shoes. People who are never in any tie or shirt, you could come in jeans and a t-shirt and all these other things. But still, there was also a way we would relate with customers and even with bosses and all sorts of things. And in this other organization, if you are seen in a shirt and a tie, for example, what would come to mind first was, are you attending some interview somewhere? You see. Now, beyond that, I would walk into a restaurant and I see the way things are running, and something would just pop into my mind. This restaurant would not be here in the next 6 months if things continue like this. So basically, culture determines how we relate with things, how we relate with people, how we relate with our customers, how we look for results, and everything. And by the end of the day, it will determine whether we are succeeding or we are not succeeding. And so everyone will be able to interact with culture in one way or the other. And I will share some pointers, but I just want to talk about a few examples that are known to many of us. I will briefly share a screen. Yeah. So when we talk of culture, generally, we are culture is in every single organization, all sorts of organization, whether it's a school, whether it's a club, whether it's a church, all sorts of institutions. There is always a way they do things, and that is what will distinguish them. The product will be the same, the market will be the same, uh, and the environment, whatever you in business, sometimes we talk of pastel, yeah, the political environment, economic environment, technological, social, all these other things, everything is the same. But then you realize that an organization will perform very well and others don't perform, even in a filling station. And that's why some other people even end up rebranding. Enough times, it's nothing to do with the product or the systems, but it is in forming the people, the social environment around us. So this is a definition I was just trying to summarize from all that I know. Is organization culture can be defined as the common or shared belief, values, habits, behavior of people within an organization. And these will be able to shape their interaction, decision-making processes, and even the overall approach to work, ultimately determining whether they are going to succeed or not. You see. So it's good for us to be serious about this element of developing a culture that will be able to support our organizations. Now, if we look at schools, say, for example, I was just learning about Lions when these protests began in Kenya. And I was amazed that they have this quite a giant school, for example. You can see how well they perform whenever now this 844 that is coming to an end soon, they would rank schools. And you know that this is one of those top schools. They have something I found very interesting. It's a culture where I think on Saturdays, is it on Saturdays or Sundays, people are allowed to walk out and go interact and do all sorts of things. And then they walk in the evening, as long as they come in by a certain time, I think by 6. That I found very interesting. In many schools, the moment children get in, it's like a prison. You don't see gate until you come back. I noticed that there is a time they are supposed to wake up, which is fairly late. I think around 6 or 5:30 or something. Many schools, it's even much earlier. And even how they compete. I was reading a book here by one of my friends and Rotarians, and he's one of those people who came from Alliance, and he's giving an example where he was found to be reading in the flowers, some thicket somewhere, when people were supposed to be in the games, and they had to go through punishment, because that means you want to you are taking unfair advantage when other people are supposed to be doing things and everyone is supposed to be involved in games. You are doing something else, you see. So if you check the way they interact with the children, how discipline is instilled and all sorts of things, that's a totally different culture. You can go to any other school, Kenya High, for example. These people work to the extent that you can, if you are people like me who didn't go to big schools, yeah, I went to a day school. You wonder whether you could make it in such a school. Yeah. So every institute, you go to a school that may be having a problem, then they change the head and a totally different system gets in place, and culture and how they interact and all sorts of things, and results change. Yeah. So if this one goes even into the universities and things like that. If you look at church, different churches have different cultures, and even within the church, talk for example Catholic Church. Like I am a Catholic. I am a Catholic. You go to our chapel halls, University of Nairobi. It's a totally different culture that will attract a different type of people, separate from the other cultures. You go to Holy Family, you go to Don Bosco, they are formed differently, and the philosophy that forms them is very different. Recently, actually, there was a change of one of our priests was transferred, and there are expectations that people had about what is going to happen when a priest is taken to a different parish. But because we had a different parish priest who had not gotten used to the norms and the culture of St. Paul's, that wasn't done, and it created some uproar, and it had to be redone again. You see, we had to do the farewell our own way. Yeah, and this is what usually causes problems. By the way, I usually say that if you have systems in place that do not support or do not somewhat work in tandem with the existing culture, then things break down. Yes, it is the system that will break down. A good example is our government of Kenya. There is always a perception that we have about government institutions, what we expect there, and things like that. For example, the predominant culture of corruption. And you wonder, when somebody talks about efficiency and things like that, it's difficult to believe. Yeah. The laziness, that what time should do people get in when you are procuring, how is the procurement process going on, and things like that. There is and that's why even having all sorts of institutions in place, having the judiciary in place, having laws in place, the constitution in place, having EACC, the one dealing with corruption in place, having the police system and all these other things, still it fails. There is a way people have been cultured there, and it always follows in one way or the other uh, the leadership and how things have always been done. In fact, I'm told that enough times when a cabinet secretary or minister goes in and tries to impose some other things, some of the junior employees will tell them, "We've seen many of you. You will just go, and somebody else will come. We've always been here." See, there is that attitude there. So it's a bit dramatic and unfortunate, but that is the culture that has been embedded there. And we say that if we are going to get these results, they are related to the culture that we've planted. Positive will bring positive, negative will bring negative. Nothing from con but con. You cannot expect anything else. Who is responsible for instilling or developing or nurturing culture, sustaining it? It always starts with the leader, the entrepreneur. Many of us who are in businesses, you are responsible for crafting even the mission, the values, the vision. Many times, by the way, when I'm talking to organizations, even running a team building, and you just ask people, what are your values? They don't know. In fact, they have to refer. Some other people Google, they go to their website to start getting into their values. You see, us who craft them, we also craft them for presentation for others. We don't even believe them. But we are the people, because we are the face of the organization. We are the people who will set up this culture. So leadership is very responsive for this. Managers, heads of departments, and they bring them down to even members. Yeah, whether you are in a chama, how do people conduct affairs there? What time do they come in? And I see, for example, even in church, the CWA, the Catholic Women Association, they have a culture, they have their own specific culture on how they even conduct their meetings, the frequency and what time should people arrive, and all sorts of things. Vibrant enough, the culture is able to support them. And by the way, it is the culture that will help you know whether you belong to an organization or you don't. You see, whichever company you go to Google, they have their own culture, which is probably a common departure as I see it. It's much more flexible, open system, much more different from, for example, if you go to General Electrics, it's a very different culture. How people do things there, it's very different. And as members of staff, sometimes we need to just adjust and see what culture is there. I remember a friend of mine in the police force, very senior person, when he was still young. I was asking him about the level of corruption, and he was saying, you know, here it is part of the culture. You see, when you are transferred to another place, you even ask, how do you survive here? How do you survive here does not mean where do you buy vegetable, where is a hostel, whatever. No, it means how do you get the bribes? How do you get more money from other people and things like that? You see, there are also influences from external environment, the government, the poor, maybe the climate, all sorts of things. How do we dress? Maybe in West Africa may be different from eastern part of Africa, from Europe, and things like that. And all that is able to influence. One thing we know about positive culture is that it will foster a supportive and productive work environment. You see, people will feel a sense of belonging. There is what we call organization citizenship. Like many of us are proud of their schools. Yeah, those people who are from big schools. They say somebody from Alliance will not finish a sentence without saying, back in Alliance, we would not see such like things. You see, we are proud of our institutions. In the University of Nairobi, for example, where I belonged, I'm proud of it. It will make the people who are members of that organization to be very proud to be there. They feel like they belong. They are citizens of that particular organization, and it will be able to help them engage and support members' well-being. Yeah, they don't work as just robots. Yeah, to fill in the blank. I'm told sometimes in the Chinese work ethic and culture, if they are building, for example, a bridge and someone drops down, the body will just be picked and taken wherever, and somebody is brought in to fill in. The work will not stop. You see, that is their culture there, things like that. So thinking about the long hours, whatever, all those things will always be determined by the culture there, and even overall organization success. So culture is normally embedded within the system. It's embedded in the vision. It's embedded in the values that we have. And like I said, we cannot just be there. We don't even know what values. Then how do you make decisions? You know, we say organizations can make decisions earlier, before any problem, and then just manage them as they go along. Yeah, because you've already known how do we make a decision when this one happens, when this happens, what happens, when for example a customer complains of something, what happens, and things like that. So we are not going to make decisions at that time. We already made them. We already know how we are supposed to carry out a particular decision. We already know how we are supposed to act, how we are supposed to respond. So it's just the opportunity. There is always this example that I read somewhere and I experienced back. I was reading about like flights. When you see pilots, uh, they already have an idea of what to do in case of a fault. So I remember at one point when we were going for some conference in Cape Town, and now this flight from Joburg to Cape Town, reaching around Cape Town, we are now descending, and then something happened just about when the plane was about to touch ground, and immediately it started going up again, and people were surprised, and all of a sudden everyone was quiet and wondering what has happened. And some of the people were drinking alcohol all through. That's around midnight. They are drinking, and then somebody tells me, no, there is no problem. There is a wheel that is not behaved. It will just come. To them, they didn't seem perturbed. But then you wonder, at what point did this pilot make a decision to go up? Yes, immediately when something wasn't working. That decision had been made earlier, so that when a problem occurs, when that situation arises, then they're just able to do it. What happens is sometimes we put those things, but then we don't follow them. And that means we are the first people to break our own culture. I talked about systems, the setup processes on how things are run, policies, and even the environment. You see, they are in our policies how we should be able to do those things. So culture can be seen, it will be smelt, it will be seen everywhere, in the way we interact, in the way we deal with our customers. The other day I was reading about um, uh, American Express. Yeah, that there was this example that somebody, a lady was traveling the following morning at 7:30. She was to catch a flight to another destination for 1 week, and just that evening she was in another restaurant about 30 miles away. So parking at around 10 p.m., she realized that she had forgotten her card, the American Express card, wherever she was in a restaurant. And in a panic mode, she didn't know what to do. So she made a call to the customer who received very pleasantly, talked very well, and they picked it very fast, and told her, well, don't worry, help is on the way. She was wondering what sort of help are they going to do at this particular time. And maybe she expected some very complicated solutions. But within 2 hours, there was a doorbell ringing. And opening the door, there was the card. Somebody had been sent to deliver the card. You see, and that was a new card. And she was wondering, what time did they make this new card and even make the arrangement to deliver it about 30 miles away? That's about 45 kilometers for people who are using kilometers. You see, it was already done and delivered, and she was pleasantly surprised. And she said, for that reason, she's a live customer there. I was asking bankers around that, do you think your bank can do this? Many times you will call, you don't see them. And that means that even if we conduct training, you train customers, you train people how to sell, you train people on all sorts of things, mental well-being, but the culture does not support the training, it still fades. And that's why most training go in vain, because the culture is not that which will be able to support. So how do we build this positive culture? We will build it through modeling. It starts with how we model it. Yeah, we build it through what people see. As a leader, I'm told there are many organizations like the KCB Bank, the former CEO Maurice Oduoro Tieno. I was told that by I think by 6:30 or earlier, they were meeting some few CEOs for tea every single day. And there is a way they had formed their own system and culture. And for that reason, and their meetings of mind and growth, they were able to see organizations grow. Actually, at some point, I was told that if you're waking up late, your organization also wakes up late, and even your people wake up late. Modeling is through leadership. People will always do what they see the leaders do. If we say, for example, let's come early, report by 7, but you will report consistently late and having excuses, including meetings. I've seen it in meetings. We want people to come early for meeting, but ourselves we don't. We come late. You see, so we must instill this culture. How do we uh, talk to people? How do we reward people? How do we respond to situations? The way we do it, in fact, this is so serious. At some point, I was studying an organization, and I realized that everybody in the organization, as at that point, because they admired the leader so much, even their language, including the grammatical issues that was in the language of their leader, they modeled and they spoke the same. That's the way it works. So people will always observe how you build this. Clear communication. How do we communicate? We do not want to imagine that everyone knows all the time what needs to be done. If it's not cast somewhere, if it's not written somewhere, we've got to communicate the same thing in written, and even the way we write. Yes, sometimes I'm amused how people even casually write emails. Yeah, everything, whatever we were taught to be capital, you start in capital, like people's names or names of places. It's just one continuous, even the punctuation, and that there is a way it portrays your organization outside. And the moment you do that, everyone else is doing it, and it's okay. It becomes a culture, because culture comes out of that repetition. It becomes normal, and that becomes our way of doing things. And by the way, changing that culture becomes very, very difficult. That's why people talk about organizational change as a painful thing. Changing change as a painful thing, because we've been used to how to do things. And to the extent that when another leader comes in and tries to make things change, that's why change should be gradual. It becomes very painful for many people, and they start rebelling it because they are not used to that. People do not want to change. They want to do things the way they've always done them, whether they're producing results or not. So consistency, you don't do this today and tomorrow you do this a different thing. Subjected to some pressure, you do it differently. Subjected to this pressure, you do it differently. If we are following our values and we are consistent in how we do things, that's the way people will get to know that this is the way it's done. Yes, it's not chancing. Yeah, including promises that people keep. Yeah, you say we will do this, then we do this. We'll do this, but we do it differently. Then that becomes a norm. It becomes another culture altogether. So we must be consistent. If it is in customer experience, we learned something today, we are inspired, and we start doing it today. By the third day, we are already tired of it, and then that thing drops because we were trying to ingrain something else and we were not very determined. So we've got to know that consistency, doing it again and again and again, will be able to help people. And sometimes, by the way, it takes the new people to come in, and you realize that the old people, if you are, for example, getting into an organization, maybe reshuffling or something, there are different other ways that can be done, because the other people are taking time to conform to if you are going to change something, but that is a different topic about change. Clarity. We cannot be vague and still expect to be instilling or building some positive culture. We can't afford to be vague in anything. We've got to communicate clearly. We've got to have things clear. If this is the dress code, it's got to be communicated clearly, and we've got to live that particular norm. Engagement, bringing people together. A positive culture will engage people, will help them, will give them an opportunity, a safe opportunity to suggest. I've seen organizations where things don't seem to be working and people are complaining, and you ask them, but why can't you share it? Why can't you share it with your boss? And say, no, no, no. They're not going to listen. They never listen. I've done that enough times. You see, so they just surrender. They're just there to earn money and look for maybe another opportunity when it comes. Giving people that room to engage using different means, and even helping them to have ways through which they think they can engage better without penalization, without judgment, so that they feel they belong. In fact, it's said in an organization, every time somebody gets in, or when you are just starting, even if you are going for an outing and you are forming a team, they want to first of all feel like they are belonging. So the first few moments, people are trying to sort of outdo each other to do what we call sometimes BOP, business opportunity presentation. They are making the good side of them, like presenting their CV, to be welcome, to be accommodated, to feel a sense of belonging. So engagement is quite an important thing in building a positive environment. Work design. If we design our work or our tasks, the people working will feel that this is either supporting them or not supporting them. And that will be able to develop either rebellion on them, hate, or love. In some instances, in some organizations, you'll realize that even the way they've designed, even for mothers with babies like Safaricom, they can still go and breastfeed. Or the way the disabled or whatever, people living with disability can be accommodated, the way people interact, the nature of office. You see, this open office that has been trendy nowadays. Uh, all sorts of things, the way work is designed, the way work is flowing, and approvals and all sorts of things will always determine whether it is supporting something positive or it's becoming a problem. There are people who, there are work environments where people do not care much about your personal life, but these are human beings. Yeah, if you don't do that, maybe they won't perform as well. Most times people want some sort of positive environment, and they will perform even if conditions are not very well. And these are researches that have been done. There is one called, is it Horton study, where they were studying environments that would be able to improve output or performance, to improve performance. And when they used light, when they were there was more light, as they were increasing light, and with different sections of the company, they realized that production was going. But because these people were gelling all together, they realized that even when things were deteriorating, the production was still going up. And they noticed that upon studies, and it's a study that has been revisited and many times, and they realized that most times it is how people gel, how they feel engaged, how they feel positive. That is what will make them perform much better than even salary. Some people think it is just the salary alone. Process of orientation, process of result. There is what I call, is it task oriented or goal oriented? Is it process oriented or goal oriented? You know, sometimes we say the end justifies the means, and that will end up interfering with how results are achieved. Yeah, I was in an organization, in my second organization, where salespeople would go, they do anything as long as they come with a signed check, and then they hand it to the organization. They will be praised and they are given their commissions. But then they know that the service that they sold was not ready. Maybe the equipment was still being shipped, but they promised that in the afternoon you are going to have internet. Yeah, we were providing internet. So they handed them over to the support team like us to go install. But then you tell them, why do you sell this? And you know, we still don't have this equipment. Now that is ours to deal with. He's done his part. You see, so if we are wired towards the end justifies the means, by the end of the day, we may end up ruining our own culture. But we must recognize the process as well. How is it achieved? Yeah, I just gave you an example of that alliance thing. you are going to win, but is this a fair way of doing it? So when people realize that it's not fair, the members of the organization will develop some negativity, and the negative culture will continue to thrive. That's what's happening in the public. We can have feedback mechanism, personal development. Are people growing? Do we have systems that help them to grow, and they see that there is concern for their development? Are they being heard? Do we have a listening ear? Recently, people have been talking about let's listen to the youth, whatever. Sometimes we don't listen. We're just looking for a way to respond to them, to counteract them, and things like that. When we listen to people's heart, I was taught that when people are talking and you're looking for information, you need to listen with your skin. You listen attentively. You listen to what is not being said. Yes, sometimes I say, even when you're reading, you read between the lines, you read what is not written. You listen to what's not being said. Yeah, they could be saying something else, portraying something, but there is something else that is underlying. And sense of belonging, which I've talked about, compensation system. Are we going to compensate fairly or unfairly? How is it perceived? How do we recognize people? We had, there are always in different organizations recognition system. Yes, the people who performed better, the people who, like in my other organization, where we were ranked according to the feedback of clients. Yeah, and I learned a lot about customer relationship there. It is the feedback of clients that would make them rank people in terms of who was the best trainer of the quarter and something like that. It was very lovely. You feel that things are fair. The other day we were discussing with somebody that there are these things that people vote. You are told to vote so that somebody can win, and you are told you can even vote as many times as possible. Then one wonders, and I've always wondered, is it fair? Is it a fair way of doing things? I find that no, that's not fair. Or somebody could be the top whatever, but the evaluation system wasn't a just system. How we celebrate achievements, recognitions, and well-being, all those things we've been able to talk about. Team spirit, which I've been able to talk about. Engagement, how people make decisions, the level of responsibility they can take. Do we encourage that particular thing? Or ours is, no, that's none of my business. I just want to see this done by this time. And always reprimanding, talking tough and things like that. That may not develop a positive working environment. Some sense of autonomy and responsibility will be very, very lovely. Not hook eye supervising one step after the other. It doesn't. And when we rebuke people when they make a mistake, we need to learn to correct people in a productive, a constructive way, and that will be able to help us. We can always ask for help. I've rushed this a lot, but that is it. We can always ask for help, not because we are weak, like somebody said, but because we want to remain strong. The question is, how do you like the current culture in your workplace? And what is it that you're going to do to improve it if it needs improvement? What support do you need? You may need to work on that so that you have a clear way forward. And it's now our time to have questions, if any, or to respond to them if they exist. I stop it there.
Then Dr. Eden.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the very good presentation. Mine is more of a comment than a question. And that is that I was in an organization where they spent millions of shillings on culture change, where we spent a lot of, the organization spent a lot of money training everybody from the messenger all the way to the CEO on culture change. So we'd have trainings on total quality management, ISO, to get ISO certification and everything. And then we came up even with the symbols of how to change the culture. We had these from the animal kingdom, like the peacock, big peacock mentality, ostrich mentality, and all that. And for the first, after that, the training was mandatory, so everybody had to go. So the buy-in was already not very good because people are saying, why must it be mandatory? But at the end of it all, at least after the training, the culture changed. At least people are more responsive and all that. And I think the accounts also showed that there were signs of improvement. And I think culture change in an organization is not an easy thing, but it is worth the trial. So OPP, thanks so much for going into details and showing us how much more we can and we should do. Asante sana.
It was a comment. Maybe Dr. Ida can go in, then I respond to one question from Maurice, and then we close it because of time.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. One of the best definitions that I heard for culture, organizational culture, the way the staff members feel on a Sunday night about going to work on a Monday morning. That was the best definition I have ever heard. And I've worked in so many organizations, but I remember particularly one hospital where on a Sunday night, I had no problem about going to work on a Monday morning because the boss, who was a lady, in fact, somebody had said that women can be very bad or very, very good. But she had an organizational culture that trickled from the top. And we knew that she was transparent and that she was honest and that she was sincere. And so there was no such thing as you going to tell her about a fellow staff member. What they call the grapevine, and she would always make sure if you can't say it in front of the other person, then don't bring it to me, because if you try to take her mushene, then she'll say, please call the other person, you say the exact same thing. So that grapevine died completely. Then we would have meetings where everybody's input was important, from the CEO to the watchman to the cleaner, because the cleaners and the askaris, they see and hear things which we do not hear about. Whenever there's somebody would lose a person, a family member, she would organize for transport. Sometimes she would come herself, or she would send a representative. And then there would be a skeleton staff in the afternoon. So that's saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And since she didn't have control over our salaries and people thought that they were not being paid enough, she said, you guys, what you do, you can do your business here. Come and sell your whatever side hustle you have. But as long as it does not interfere with your work. So there would be that time in the afternoon where people could do that. So this person, and then at the end of the day, she would give us something to feel, asking about her, to appraise her as a person, as the director. So I want you guys to be completely honest and tell me what you like about me, what you don't like about my leadership style, and how we can improve, because so it was like a real family. And then I remember there's a time some big company came as an franchise from India, and they tried to poach staff with big salaries. And imagine nobody wanted to go. I have never seen such a low turnover in any company. Because I've worked in hospitals where every year the people were disappearing after trainings. They would just disappear because the culture was, gossip, people favoritism. It all depends on the leader at the top. So that culture is how your staff feel on a Sunday night about coming to work on a Monday. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. That's wonderful. Yeah. Do they feel a sense of belonging? Do they feel they are welcome and something like that? Do they feel engaged? In fact, many times people would think that, oh, if I have higher salary, it doesn't matter. Well, maybe in certain cultures, again, because culture, for some reason, tend not to be necessarily uniform. In one particular place, you'd realize that, for example, even how we are brought up in different schools, you realize that maybe people from a certain school, they are focused in a particular manner. Maybe very competitive, they always want to outdo the other. And sometimes, if they are not cultured to be doing it fairly, it's cutthroat, you see. While other people are taught to be more collaborative, more team spirit. And that's why many times in organizations, we know that people who are not taught teamwork in school, and therefore they've got to be initiated into the same. I'd like to respond briefly to Omondi's question, which was about how people, how culture can be changed without changing people. Yeah, changing people is the extreme end. Now, we've got to know that I just want to share two things. Yeah, we have no minute left. One is nothing is instant. It's got to be given time, a reasonable time. You see, so we will start it, and you start only by a small thing. Let's say, for example, I've seen in some organizations where time is a problem. People come in late. People uh, are not very observant. You talk about our meeting will start at 10. They start walking in. From that 10, that is when they start preparing to come for a meeting. The moment we start changing this, then we need to expect that there is going to be some bit of resistance. It will always start with training. Leaders, I like talking about leaders as salespeople. You want to sell to people this vision, this idea of what you have. And some people will pick it and start doing it. The people who've picked it, encourage them and affirm them. The people who are yet to, you can call them and talk to them, not reprimanding, but asking what is their difficulty, what they see. I have this example where in a certain organization where they were doing construction work, they made for them helmets, but they had a culture of just dropping them, not using them, more or less like you see our motor riders in Nairobi town. So instead of somebody earlier had started rebuking them, and this is good for your health. What if you get in danger and whatever? But then along the way, somebody came in who changed the approach and would go and ask them, walking there, hey, come, let me, what is it fitting well? Could it be hurting your head or something like that? And showing concern and talking to them one at a time, not necessarily in a group, and finding their own concern and seeing whatever areas would be adjusted. And by the end of the day, they were able to change. So sometimes in an organization, we just send memos and we say from now on, people do not like necessarily to be dictated upon. They want to be encouraged. Another thing is when making this decision, make it collaborative, make it as if it's coming from them. You see, so we've had a meeting and we've agreed that from now henceforth, we will always be starting in time. And let one of them, in some, depending on cases, let one of them be the one responsible for that particular initiative. Who will be taking roll call? One of them will be taking roll call. And after that, for people who come early, recognize them and affirm them and encourage the other people and something like that. There are lots of other ways that can be done, including incentives and things like that. And so in a nutshell, you can communicate it. Communication is key, but then in an influencing and persuasive manner, not commanding and things like that. Then make this decision be creative, and give it time, yes, to adjust. And don't make changes, all sorts of changes in one go. Just one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, and then over time people will be able to adapt. The other thing is model it. Yes, model it. Thank you. We are past time. I think we have to stop there. I hope that made sense, Maurice.